of the church. I enjoy the little offset between the church year and the calendar year. A reminder that God's time is not like our time. Actually, all of Advent maybe focuses on noticing that distinction and helping us attend, get ready, prepare to calibrate ourselves to God's arrival schedule. The readings this first Sunday of Advent, you might have noticed, they are, I thought, like a curmudgeonly old professor who wants to make sure on the first day of class that you are well aware that this one's not a slacker class. If you're going to do the reading for one of your classes, this should be it. We're going to get somewhere comforting, I believe, by the end of these scriptures. But their first work is maybe to disorient us from our daily usual rhythms, our worldly rhythms, so that once we're disoriented, we might have a chance of getting oriented to God's rhythm. And I find today's scriptures disorienting because of a basic tension that I heard in them strongly this week. We read from Isaiah, the prophet, "No eye has seen any God besides you who works for those who wait for him." But in the same passage, "God, you have hidden your face from us." Or from the psalmist, a similar movement between trust and a lack of current sight. "Restore us, O God of hosts. Show the light of your countenance, and we shall be saved." You hear the trust there. We know that when you show the light of your countenance, we'll be saved. But also, it's pleading, show us the light of your countenance. And that's a refrain in that psalm. It comes back again and again. That's the tension that I have heard in these readings. And Jesus is faithful to continuing the tension that he has received from the prophets before him when he says in the Gospel of Mark, "Truly I tell you, this generation," he's speaking to a group of people, "this generation will not pass away until all these things, the completion of God's purpose for the world, have taken place. But also, about that day and hour, no one knows." So which is it? Are you showing up or are you not, God? What really is your schedule of arrival? Have any of you ever gotten a little belligerent in asking that to God? Sort of yelling that? Maybe that's not who you are. But there are a lot of ways of pleading that question to God. When will you bring peace, God? In Jerusalem, in New Hampshire, in my family? When will you bring justice, God, for the evils that we know, for healing, for the hurts we know? When will my dignity just be accepted by all of my neighbors, celebrated even? God, when will there be a day that is not just me putting one foot in front of the other again? So many ways to plead with God for God's arrival. What really, God, is your schedule of arrival? Is it in this generation, or does nobody know? And I came to wonder with these texts if part of the goal of these authors, of these prophets, wasn't to churn up that from within us, from the hidden place within us, to get us to voice our desire for God's arrival, to let that all out. Because as I went through that process, I found that once I'd spoken those desires and that question to God, then finally there was some place inside me that was emptied. And I stood some chance of in that emptiness of hearing a response. And as I came to that quiet place, I heard the tension in these readings less as one or the other. And I came to less of a question of when God, when, on which day, and in which hour. And I heard, instead of a question, the place that Jesus gets to at the end of this passage. What I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. It's not really a question. It's not really an answer. Keep awake. All the prophetic visions of God's arrival time and God's revealing, when they are pieced together, they kind of surround a center point that is not one word, it's not one image, it's not one answer, but they surround a physical action of waiting, of keeping awake, waiting, I would say waiting for the Lord, which might be a little different than just waiting for the Lord. And I thought then, as I kind of pictured that constellation and what was in the center, I thought of a conversation that took place in the vestry this week. We were having a conversation about welcome and reflecting on welcome at St. Andrew's. And how all of us from our many different backgrounds receive welcome, and what the depth is within welcome. And someone told a story of ministry in an intercultural setting, going from an all-white church in New Hampshire and partnering with an all-black church in Boston, and then going together to a third place to minister together. And they talked about going down on the bus together and how everybody came with goodwill and hope, and there was much good fruit born, but the kind of energy of the day was, there was this elevated energy where I wonder how this is going to go. I expect that the good fruits today will somehow be a little different than my yesterday, because of who we are with and how we are with today. I kind of elevated waiting. The shared space has possibilities beyond a daily norm of waiting alone. And I thought of that image and that story, and then I thought of maybe that's something like what we're being asked to enter through these readings. Waiting with God, who I notice is very different from me. And a kind of elevated waiting, saying, what might happen waiting with the Lord? The last reading chronologically is Paul, right? Because Paul's writing after Jesus has come and gone. And finally, I thought Paul sums it up. I don't think I could put it more concisely than this. He captures something about waiting for the Lord when he writes to the Corinthians, who are, by the way, when he's writing to the Corinthians, it's not a group any bigger than the group in this room. It's a small group of Christians like us. And he says, you are not lacking in any spiritual gift as you wait for the revealing of the Lord. Waiting can so often feel like a lack. We're waiting, and when such and such comes, then we'll be fulfilled. But Paul says, you are not lacking in any spiritual gift as you wait for the revealing of our Lord Jesus Christ. And that sounded to me like that elevated space, waiting for the Lord, where we're kind of forward on our toes. Have no fear, there's plenty of action in the Christian life. You all know that. Some of us like to be in motion. Family Promise, housing homeless people in our church this week, was starting setup at 7:30 a.m. this morning. There's plenty of action in the Christian life. But Advent is the season when we remember that all our action, if it's going to be in the right direction, a righteous direction, it has to start from that waiting place. It has to start from being with the Lord. Not waiting frantically or, like Christmas decorations out on lawns before Thanksgiving. We're a little bit desperate there. Some of us are guilty of that, right? In this room, not guilty. I don't know. That's not the right word. But you know that feeling, or you've seen that expression, right? Come on, Christmas, we need you. But Advent helps us, encourages us, gives us a place to wait with the Lord so that we can act in that right direction. Waiting in the way of Isaiah, in the way of the psalmist. I'm always hesitant to just sort of list a number of attributes in a sermon because you just get lost in words. But I mean, look at the expressions in those texts in Isaiah and the Psalm. There's readiness, there's expectation, there's desire, curiosity, there's hope. There are tremors, a kind of decenteredness, but decentered from the way of the world, so that something might take place. There's penitence, acceptance, trust. All of this in that waiting for the Lord. Different from desperation, even when there's a lack of sight. I'll leave you with this image from a practice called centering prayer, one kind of prayer, centering prayer. It's an image that anticipates where we're going to get in a couple weeks when we spend time with Mary. In centering prayer, they say that a hope of the time, try to have this posture in yourself as you sit in silence and pray, consenting to the presence and action of God, consenting to the presence and action of God. And I thought of Mary, who consents and conceives. Mary's womb is definitely a space prepared. And that's that space that's in the middle of all these texts, the space prepared. So close your eyes, breathe in, and breathe out. Breathe in, keep awake. Breathe out. Breathe in, consenting to the presence and action of God. Breathe in, waiting for the Lord. Breathe out. Breathe Advent. Breathe Advent.